Well, my heart was certainly haunted by reading this book. Can you let me start? Just let me start. You don't get a, you don't not getting a second pet. Hey there, everyone. Afrodo Reviews here, helping you decide: is that book worth reading of a second breakfast, or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? Let's decide. You're spoiled. Heart Hunt Havoc is a gothic horror novella written by Freydis Moon and published on February 14th of 2023. If it wasn't for Orc and Her Bride, this would be the most recent book that I've read. However, Orc and Her Bride came out on February 21st of 2023, so unfortunately it does lose that credit. Apart from that, there really isn't much else to say about this book, since due to the short amount of time that it's been out, as well as the fact that it wasn't necessarily it didn't exactly explode in popularity, there isn't much else that I can say, so here's the report card. Now we move on to the cover. Now, obviously, it's on my Kindle, so if I'm talking about it, that's why I'm looking at my phone right now, just to be clear. But it'll be up here like it normally is if I remember. Now, the cover of Heart Havoc is pretty good. You got a nice red background with this house also in the background, while our two main protagonists, Colin and Bishop, are front and center. All in all, combined with the fact that it's an artistic cover, it's a pretty decent one. Now, the complaints that I might offer is that while I appreciate the subtle symbolism of these snapping wolf jaws right here, I do personally think that it goes a little overboard. My first impression when I saw this wasn't that it was wolf jaws, but rather more of an Eldritch-style Dunwich horror monster than the wolf-headed jilted ex-ghost lover here that we got. Especially in conjunction with the slightly off proportions of the house behind them, where it's designed just off enough that something's wrong with it, even if you can't put your mind on it immediately. And in addition, I'm not really sure what the point of this door is in the forefront. It almost feels like a random clip art asset that was just kind of photoshopped on top. It doesn't fit with the aesthetic of this house pictured. The bright white clashes heavily with the more darker, warm colors around it. And it's just, I don't get it. Overall, it's a good cover, but there are some design choices that I feel weren't really made with much thought. But for now, we move on to the synopsis. Now, the synopsis of this horror novella is rather simple. Colin Hart is a transgender... I'm basically just going to recite what I remember from the back, because the back summarizes it pretty well. I do still, however, recommend checking out my TBR video, because I want views. I might as well be honest with you guys. That this book is short enough that what I read on the back... Well, the back, because it's a Kindle book, that what I read as a description of this book is enough context for what I think I'm going to talk about. But basically, Colin Hart is a transgender exorcist that is called in by the non-binary Bishop Martinez to clean out their house after it's kind of just been infested with ghosts, a lot like cockroaches. However, the job is far more complicated than Colin Hart could have ever anticipated, as the main offending ghost is not only the ex-husband of Bishop Martinez, who made a deal with a demon just seconds before he was killed, and thus has demonic powers while also trying to make Bishop's life a living hell. But he finds himself drawn to Bishop in a very non-professional sense. And because he's never watched 100 Feet and seen what happened when a guy sleeps with the ex of an abusive ghost in the house, it makes things more complicated for him. Apart from that, since the book adds a new twist, the character backstory or the character dynamics or the story itself, every chapter, I can't really go much into it without bringing spoilers. And because of that, I want to be very clear that the review of this book is definitely going to have spoilers in it. I think I forgot to do that in the previous review. But for the full sake of transparency, yeah, I'm probably not going to be able to talk about this book fully without some kind of spoiler. So let's start out with the review. This book is good. In a sense, it does handle its main subject well. This isn't a book focusing on LGBT characters. This is a gothic horror novella focusing on the haunted of a house that happens to have LGBT characters. And when it comes to the horror aspect, the story feels well written and the prose is really decent at painting a picture. There's definitely a mythos here that I think I would like to know more about, but the book itself, it doesn't really have enough pages to really flesh it out in a time span, although I think it should have personally, but I was someone who was raised Catholic and has a very strong interest in Nordic mythology. A fair amount of what is presented in terms of its mythos doesn't really fly over my head, but I can see how someone who has neither of those could be lost at a certain point in this book, is what I'm trying to say. The characters are fine enough, personally speaking, while I do like Colin, and Bishop is okay enough. I do think my favorite character was Telra, if I remember her name right. The Nordic witch who they call in to help cleanse the house a little bit. She just has a very strong, distinct personality from the first second she's on the page, and you learn that she's a Nordic witch, and I could almost see what she looked like and who she was before the book really got into describing her. She just really makes a very strong impression that Bishop definitely doesn't do, and Colin kind of does, but it takes a bit long to do so. And I mean, Freydis Moon clearly agreed, because the book that's advertised at the back of this book clearly states that she's going to be the main character of the next book, at least one of them, because I'm not going to spoil too much, but that's the main reason I'm not just posting that up there, but apparently she's going to be the next one. I just hope she doesn't go the route it kind of sounds like she's going to go with. However, ultimately, I think this book is one of those books that desperately needed more page to work with. I don't think this should have been a horror novella as much as it is. While this book is definitely a paranormal gothic horror, more in the veins of Exorcist in a sense, the romance is a large part of it, and the romance is very bad. As much as this book is a gothic horror, a gothic paranormal mystery kind of a gothic paranormal horror kind of story, the romance is a large part of it, as not only is it promised on the back, but the book does focus on it a fair amount. And it's not a very good romance. I've seen more chemistry from 4th grade science kids. I'm not joking when I say coming from the masterful chemistry of the Red, White, and Royal Blue book to this book is a lot like getting whiplash. Because while Henry and Alex just oozed with that, while they just ooze with their chemistry for each other, Bishop and Colin just have such a lack of it that it's almost shocking. Like, when the two of them finally decide that they can't stay away from each other and they need to, just go at it in the house, despite the fact that apparently neither of them seen 100 feet. Our two characters kind of go at each other at a certain point with, like, no build-up whatsoever. It's just at one point you see Colin sort of hinting that he's attracted to Bishop, and then at the next point they're making the beast with two backs. Like, you get the sense that they're attracted to each other, but this attraction never extends into genuine romance. It's a lot like watching kids play with dolls and saying, this character loves this character, so they smooch and then they go to the bed. And I made it no secret in the past that, again, as I mentioned in my last review, that when it comes to romance novels of any sort, I very much prefer that the characters have much more emotional chemistry than physical chemistry. However, even with that in regards, I don't even think Bishop and Colin have physical chemistry together. I really am not joking when I say I did not get any of their chemistry whatsoever. I was genuinely caught off guard when they finally did share a bed, because I was just like, it came out of nowhere to me. Like, I was willing to believe at first that Bishop was doing this solely to piss off their ex-husband, who is still in the house as the ghost. But the book the narrative continues to treat it like that was them deciding to, never mind, we are attracted to each other. Let's at least do a sort of friends with benefits kind of deal. And the thing about the story really justifies that even later on. Bishop is very contained about what they tell Colin, even though Colin makes it a clear point numerous times that he needs to know everything in order to be able to cleanse the house properly. And it's just one of those. And even when they do come clean, they take the easy solution, and instead of just talking, they decide to just let Colin root around in their brain, so they can tell the truth, but not actually tell the truth, And while I think the book was trying to hint that this was because the trauma of the events that they dealt with when the haunting began and what eventually led to it makes their memories very hazy. The narrative, it doesn't really support that very much. It does genuinely just feel like this was the easiest solution to tell the truth without have to actually have Bishop tell the truth. Since this novella is so short, I am focusing on this because the book does take a considerable amount of pages to focus on the relationship between the two. And Moon decided with the limited amount of space that they had that the book was better off focusing on these scenes of romance rather than anything else. However, with the romance, this also brings it down because this is a horror story, and the fact that you don't really connect with the characters' relationship with each other, how Bishop, I would argue, is very undercharacterized for who they are, and Colin, although he does get a fair amount more characterization, doesn't get enough, in my opinion. I would say that the horror falls flat in several points because although the prose is good and the story around it is good, I never really felt tense in the moment that the book wanted me to feel tense because I didn't have a strong connection to these characters or their relationship to each other. The only time I was actually genuinely like, ooh, was with Telra and her basically openly challenging Bishop's ex when he's at the height of his power, because she has a arrogance and he's a power abuser. So the two of them clashing, I was actually worried that, Telra was gonna get hurt in this and we wouldn't see any more of her. But apart from that, no, not really. It's just the horror elements do start to fall flat because I don't have a strong connection to any of these characters. Even the villain themselves just kind of feels like they exist at several points. They don't feel like a present threat as much as they should have been. I mean, even at several points, there's where it's like, I want to talk to you without him there. And he's just gone for a few hours. I mean, it's like, it's so easy just to get rid of him for a few hours. He doesn't feel like a threat. And I get that the story itself is saying that, it's only a few hours, it's temporary. And so long as, he keeps throwing open the door and inviting ghosts in like cockroaches, that Bishop is suffering because they can't sleep very well, it just doesn't feel like they're a threat. We don't really see the painful... We don't really see the negative things he's doing. He doesn't feel like a danger. He doesn't feel like a danger. Again, especially if Freydis Moon goes the route, I think she's going to go with the sequel. Or I think they're going to go with the sequel. All in all, it leaves for an experience that's not necessarily bad, but I don't really think was good either. So I'm going to give the book a 5 out of 10. Overall, I feel what should be a tense story of gothic horror and romance with a strong cast of diverse characters, it mostly just kind of falls flat. It had a lot of potential, and ultimately in the end, it's the dominoes falling all over each other that makes this book worse than it should be. Because the characters don't feel strong, the romance flopped. Because the romance flopped, the gothic horror section about dealing with abusive ex-partners who have come back as jilted ghost lovers doesn't work as strongly as it should have. And because of both of those things, the climax of the story doesn't feel as strong as it should be. Overall, it creates not for a great experience, but it's a very middle-of-the-road kind of deal. But the real question is, does it deserve Mount Doom? 3 strikes. No. Personally, I'm not really sure I would recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend against it. And I might go seek out the Telra sequel just to see what it's like, because I do think that this author has potential. It's just that they fumbled over this particular book. Anyways, it's a nice LGBT story, and it focuses more on the gothic horror elements than necessarily being LGBT, so I'm not going to include the normal, disclaimer I have where I'm not in the target audience, because... And that very much holds true for most of the book. While Colin does deal with some gender dysphoria, and we do see some aspects of his hormone treatment, we don't really see anything else focusing on that aspect of his character. It's a gothic horror first and an LGBT novel second. And perhaps there's some stuff here that you might enjoy that I otherwise didn't. I mean, as much as I'm saying that this isn't an LGBT book, this does still have representation that if you were part of these two groups that you might be more interested in seeing. I don't necessarily think that makes the book any better, but you might be able to connect to the characters better, more than I did in any case. And thus, these elements that I think didn't work, you might think works better. Otherwise, I don't really have much else to say. It's time to move on to the next book. And honestly, I'm hoping this one has an ace up its sleeve. But until then, remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure's worth having, even the bad ones.